Today we're going to be talking about modeling percents. So a percent is a part to whole ratio where the whole is always 100. Each percent can be modeled on a 10 by 10 grid and can also be written as a ratio. So for example, 78% is equal to 78 hundredths. So 78 hundredths is 0.78. So for our first example, we're going to use the 100 squares below to model each percentage. Then we're going to complete the different representations below. So our first square here, we want to shade in 50%. So we want to shade in half of our model here because we know if the percent is over 100, so 50 out of 100, we know that that is equal to 1/2 of the picture. So I know that there are 10 rows in my base cube. So I'm going to shade in 5 of my, for 50 out of 100, and that is 50% of my picture. Now I'm going to shade in 35%. So 35% would be 35 out of 100. When I simplify that down, I'm going to divide them both by 5, and I will get 7/20. So if I shade 35, I'm going to shade in 3 rows. And then 5 in another row for 35, or 7/20. For my next example, I want to shade 10%. So 10% of my cube here would be 10 out of 100, and 10 pieces out of 100 pieces. If I simplify that, I can divide them both by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 100 divided by 10 is 10. So I will need to shade in 1/10. And I know that 1/10 is just one straight row. All right, now we are going to use the percent model at the right to answer the questions A through D. So A says how many squares are shaded. So I'm going to go ahead and count my squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 in the first 2 rows. And now there are 25 total squares shaded. So if I write a ratio for that, there's 25 out of 100 shaded. So we have 25 over 100. And to represent that as a decimal, I know 25 out of 100 is just 25%. So if the shaded square represents 25%, then what percent do the unshaded squares represent? So I know that there's 100 total, and 25 of them are shaded. So that means that 75 of them are not shaded. So 75 out of 100 would be 75% that are not shaded. And now we are going to be converting between percents and decimals. So a percent can be written over 100 and then read aloud. So for example, 45 hundredths. 45 hundredths is equal to 0.45. So a decimal can also be divided by 100, which is the same as moving the decimal 2 places to the left. So dividing the number can by 100 is also the same as moving it 2 places to the left. So 45 divided by 100, I will just move my percent over twice and get 0.45. 87 hundredths is the same as 87%. And 150%, if I move it twice to the left, my decimal will go between my 1 and my 5, so it's 1.5. So now we're going to use our understanding of converting between percents and decimals to answer the questions below. So I want to convert 70% into a decimal. I'm going to scoot my percentage over 2 times to the left, and that gives me 0.7. Now 16% twice to the left gives me 16 hundredths. 37%, if I move my percent sign twice to the left, that gives me 37 hundredths. And now I'm going to turn 28 hundredths into a percentage. So I will move, since I have a decimal here and I want to change it to a percentage, I'm going to move it twice to the right. So 28 hundredths will give me 28%. 62 hundredths, 62 over 100. I'm going to move my decimal twice to the right for 62%. Now I have 90 hundredths or 9/10. I'm going to move my decimal twice to the left, and I'm going to get 90%. So now we're going to use the information given in each column to complete the missing representations. So, in example 1, we have just the shaded part given to us, and I know that 1 row equals 10, 2 rows equals 20, and 3 rows equals 30. So 30 out of 100 are shaded, and 30 out of 100 would be 30%. And if I wanted to turn my percent to a decimal, I would move my percent sign over 2 times to the left and get 0.3. So now, number 2, I have 75%. So I know 75% is going to be 75 out of 100. So 75 out of 100, I will need to shade 75 squares. So 2 rows is 20, 4 rows is 40, 6 rows is 60, plus 10 more is 70, plus 5 more is 75. So 75 hundredths shaded, 75%. To turn my percent to a decimal, I'm going to move it twice to the left and get 75 hundredths. If you go ahead and do our last example, 45 hundredths, remember that is 45 out of 100. How many squares will I need to shade for 45 out of 100? Turn 45 hundredths to a percentage, then turn it to a decimal, and you can answer number 8. Number 8 says, Todd wrote the statement below, but made an error. Describe his mistake and correct his work. So Todd says that 50% equals 5 wholes. Tell me what the mistake is and correct his work. After that, you can glue these into your journals and write a summary about the lesson.